Hi there. I'm going to do a review for Spider-Man 2. This movie came out in 2004 and pretty much stars Tobey Maguire, Alfred Molina, Kirsten Dunst, and who else is there? There was James Franco and J.K. Simmons. But nonetheless, directed by Sam Raimi, this movie was quite. I mean, it wasn't that this first Spider-Man was a particularly bad movie. It was actually a pretty good movie for what it was. I mean, it was fine. It was fine as a superhero movie. It was fine as a Spider-Man movie. This movie takes it up a step further. This movie has quite a bit of an emotional range to it. Um, Whatever problems there was with Spider-Man, this one kind of brought an end to that problem. This is probably one of the best. I think this is one of the best superhero movies ever made. It's just so well written. I mean, for what it is. I mean, this is Spider-Man. The creature problems are always going to be there. The problems of Peter Parker are always going to be there. But nonetheless, it works out. Um, Yeah, the biggest problem with Spider-Man is that the biggest thing about Spider-Man 2 is a continuation and the fact that Tobey Maguire, Peter Parker is having troubles holding a job. He's trying to go to college or university. He's trying to do all these things. Nonetheless, he's also trying to be Spider-Man, and his outfit changes a little bit, and he more or less has perfected his art. Um, he's not having troubles learning how to spin spider webs. It's all good. This movie does a great job with the concept of what it means, what you have to do, and for more or less, it's a near perfect film. I mean, it's a comic book movie. There's really not much you can do with a comic book movie. They have their limitations built into themselves. Can't really make them much better than a comic book movie. There has been better efforts, but this was for its type. It was the best one, pretty much. In terms of the whole concept is that Peter Parker meets Alfred Molino's character, Doctor Octavius. And Doctor Octavius is a particular character because he's sort of trying to help the world, so to speak. He's trying to help the world in a way that suggests that he does have legitimate aims. More or less, he's trying to make it so that he can build a nuclear fusion reactor to provide power to the world, free energy. Well, I don't know how free it could be, but nonetheless, it's one of those concepts. And of course, he's a genius, and of course, he takes Peter Parker under his wing for 2 seconds. But nonetheless, this movie created a small problem. Of course, it's all being funded by James Franco, who's playing playing oh, having brain fart. Harry Osborn. So Harry Osborn's funding all this. It's actually quite the interesting movie. Of course, it's got all the problem, like it's got certain limits, but nonetheless, Doctor Octavius performs an experiment in which he gets a successful fusion reaction to go, but he loses control of it. And of course, the Doctor Octavius has developed four mechanical arms that are agitated, so it's sort of like a joke. This is of course based on the comic character of Doctor Octopus, and when Doctor Octavius, of course, has the malfunction in the fusion reaction, um, it ends up wrecking the suit he puts on for these four mechanical arms, and they end up sort of fusing into his body almost. But nonetheless, they have everything go off in a particularly nasty scene involving a couple of poor doctors. I honestly think that was a nasty scene. Of course, they all die, and he ends up coming out, and he's contemplating his reality now that he's he had to put an inhibitor chip into the forearm so they wouldn't have any control over him. Although in reality, I don't think they would have any control anyways. I don't know how they would have proper pathways back, but nonetheless, these arms start to take over him as a mastermind, and he basically transforms into Doctor Octopus. This is not entirely how it happened in the comics, of course. There's significant differences between the comics and the movies. But nonetheless, it works nonetheless for its type of story. They kind of had to do it this way. This movie has, and of course, basically Peter Parker's trying to figure out what to do. He's trying to be in sort of a relationship with Mary Jane, played by Kirsten Dunst. And more or less, this movie's trying to play that role as he's trying to balance a whole bunch of different stuff. But nonetheless, we get Spider-Man dealing with Dr. Octopus. Dr. Octopus, of course, attacks him in the middle of broad daylight one day. Not too differently from what Green Goblin did in Spider-Man, but I don't know. This movie does a pretty good job. I think Doctor Octavius is a somewhat better villain than Green Goblin, but this movie here, I don't know. It's just two different villain types, and I prefer. And they also did something else in this movie. In the first movie, there was an accusation that the Spider-Man character was a little bit too rubbery, like the visual effects for him was a little bit too super duper. So they kind of actually toned it down, and they added some weight to the character. So when he's web slinging, he doesn't look entirely like he's like a Super Ball. Nonetheless, yeah, they have a fight, and one of the fights actually is kind of amusing because it involves his aunt, because Dr. Octavius takes Aunt May, and of course it has all these moments. But it was rather funny because it's got that moment where Spider-Man says, "We sure showed him," and she says, "What do you mean we?" He's like, "Oh well," but nonetheless, it works out. Aunt May, of course, I think in this movie, these movies, Aunt May is portrayed as a proper aged woman as opposed to what later came in. Things get a little bit weird in the the Spider-Man movies under Disney because suddenly they bring in Marissa Tomei and she looks a little bit too young, but whatever. This movie here, it works out. It's got a decent premise to it. I don't think it's necessarily got perfection. Of course, at the end of the movie, Doc Ock and Spider-Man get into the major fight. And of course, Spider-Man, Mary Jane Watson gets the reveal that indeed Spider-Man and Peter Parker are the same person, which I'm not entirely sure if that ever happened in the comics or not. I don't really know. It doesn't really matter to me. The comics have their way of doing things, and the movies have their way. Even in Superman, Superman eventually sort of reveals to Lois Lane that he is Superman. But nonetheless, you got Spider-Man doing Spider-Man antics. There is one interesting scene involving a subway ride. Well, not subway, but light rail in Chicago. I guess it's not really Chicago, but it is the light rail for Chicago, more or less. And it's involves a fight, and of course, Spider-Man has to web sling to prevent this train from going off the tracks because out of control and they lost their brakes. And so he has to web sling a lot, and there's a special little moment where he ends up in amongst the crowd of people, and they realize that he's just a normal kid, a young adult. And of course they say, "We won't tell anybody." And Doc Ock comes back and takes care of some of them. But nonetheless, yeah, this movie, very, very good, very well done. I can't really say too many things against it. I think the only thing I don't like about Spider-Man movies is that these ones don't feature the web slinging web shooters. These are actually just built in to his hands spider web generators. So it looks a little bit funky, him using his hands in a certain particular way to generate the webs. Um, but nonetheless, this movie did them that. These movies did them that way. They eventually do fix that problem, but whatever. A different way of doing it. I think they had a few problems with trying to concept these things, like the idea of spider silk. But nonetheless, this movie is really well done. Um, yeah, the ending. Peter Parker ends up sort of with Mary Jane Watson, sort of not. Actually, the only other thing I kind of wish for these movies is that they had focused more on his first actual girlfriend, but that's nonetheless, they focus on Mary Jane Watson. Because truth is, at this point in his life, he's actually more in with either Gwen Stacy or Betty Brant, which is the newspaper secretary, editor, whatever you want to call her. And nonetheless, it's Mary Jane in these movies. That's who they run with. It's fine. It works out. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's a pretty good movie. So there.